Good morning, everyone. My name is Kathy Olafson, and I work as the Manager of Stakeholder Engagement here at Food Recovery Network. I will be your humble moderator for our Roundtable Talks today. We're really excited to get started and just dive in and share about all the great that FRN has been up to recently. Before we dive into all the fun stuff, I have a couple of housekeeping items here on the screen. Like I introduced, many folks that have already done so. Keep introducing yourselves in the chat. We'd love to hear kind of where you're tuning in from, your name, and your organization or chapter if you're part of the Food Recovery Network. You can also submit any questions that you have throughout our time here today. There's a Q&A function that you can use, and we can address those throughout our talk. We'll definitely have plenty of opportunities for questions and comments, so definitely keep those coming in through the chat and the Q&A function. Also, finally, this session is being recorded, and we'll make sure to send out the video in a few days. We cannot see or hear you, though, but there is going to be an opportunity for you to be able to unmute yourself if you wish. So in that case, we will be able to see and hear you, and it will be recorded. But other than that, I will just dive right in, keep it going through the chat. So for those of you that may have joined us last July, Food Recovery Network launched our official strategic framework that we've called FRN 10X. And this now we're about halfway through our program year. These roundtable talks are an opportunity for us to kind of reflect and look ahead to the remainder of our program year that matches the academic calendar. So we have Regina, our executive director, and Katie, our chief operating officer, here today as our hosts to walk us through all these great details. So before I go ahead and let Katie and Regina introduce themselves, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll because we'd love to hear from you all here today to describe your relationship to Food Recovery Network and what best fits your category. So if you can check out the screen, I just went ahead and launched the poll. If you just can go ahead and describe your relationship to FRN. Are you a student, alumni, a represent a nonprofit that receives donated food service professional, higher education? I see some responses coming in. I'll let it set up for just a couple more seconds. Awesome. I'll just give it a couple more seconds. All right. I will go ahead and share the results so everyone can see who we have on the call here today. This is really fun. This is actually my first time using a poll, so this is fun from my end. So we have a good amount of students on the call, which is great to hear. We have a couple of FRN alumni, so representatives at nonprofits that receive donated food, higher education professionals, food waste reduction professional, and a few others. So thanks so much for sharing. We're definitely excited to have you all here with us today and really share what FRN has been up to. So with that, I'm gonna let Katie go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be with you today. My name is Katie Jones, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Food Recovery Network, and excited to hear from you today and share a little bit about what we've been up to. So thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. And Regina, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as well for our audience?
Hi, everyone. Hello, amazing FRN students. We're so thankful for all of you and for everything that you do for us across the country. So glad to see everyone. I'm Regina. I'm the executive director here at Food Recovery Network. And I want to say right now, for those of you who maybe weren't on the conversation, on the calls that we had in July, a couple of things will not change, and that is my deep adoration that you will hear throughout this conversation today for everyone who's part of the FRN movement. Also, something that you won't see that has changed from before is just this opportunity for invitation for back and forth conversation between and among all of us. That's really why we're having this conversation today as a jumping off from where we were this summer, because so much has changed. There's a few things, a few cultural things here at FRN that remain the same, but so many things that have happened. And I'm just so excited to have Cassie and Katie infuse their voice and yours into the work that we all care so deeply about. So thanks for spending your time with us today. Thanks, Cassie, for being our moderator.
Yeah, thank you so much, Regina. And to Regina's point, we're really excited to hear from you all, creating this feedback loop of hearing about your reactions and thoughts. So definitely keep it up in the chat. Like I said at the start, we'll have plenty of opportunities to engage throughout our presentation here today. So Regina, I will now turn it over back to you.
Great. So again, today's conversation is a jumping off point from where we began in July, knowing that there was so much work even before July. You know, FRN is almost 10 years old. And as we lean into the things that we've learned over the years, what we were able to produce through all that learning, all that trial and error, all that success was Food Recovery's FRN 10X, and that is our strategic framework. And I know a lot of you are in different stages of becoming comfortable with that concept of our framework. What is guiding our work over the next several years? And this is all based on things that we've learned from all of you who are here on this conversation today. Whether or not you were part of the conversation in July, we know that you've been in FRN's corner for a very long time. So when we had these early conversations, and again, hooked onto what we've learned over the years, the main premise of FRN's strategic framework that Katie, when Katie came onto the team almost a year ago, really helped us to crystallize is that what we aim to do is to feed everyone who's hungry in this country with recovered food. And we know it's a really big, ambitious goal. And we also know that all of the recovered food in this country isn't going to feed everyone who's hungry. We know that, but that's what we aim to do, knowing that in collaboration and in partnership, other organizations, other individuals are also doing their work as well. And that's how we're going to make this big cultural shift. Food is a right, and we know that, and we are not apologizing for that. And when we share the food that we produce in our country, we help everyone around us. There's way too many people who are food insecure. And we also know that when we waste this precious, beautiful food that humans could eat, we're directly causing harm to our environment. So that's our work. That's what we're tasked to do. That's our movement. And we have this quote here to remind us of that, to remind us of the extremely hard work that all of you are engaged in, that you don't shy away from, and that you ask other people to join you in that work, however small or big it might be. We're in this together. So I find motivation from that quote. One of the main things that we have learned from Food Recovery Network, the staff, the board of directors, all of you who are stakeholders across the country, is that, yes, we really need to not, again, shy away from our equity work. And I say work, but I really mean practice, because it is something that you do every day. It's something that you try every day to exemplify. And we know that there's a lot of unrest for so many different reasons all across this country. And again, that everyone is feeling that in very different ways. So we're not here to articulate that for any one person, but what we want to do is give the space and the recognition that we know that some of these things deserve. So first, and this is newer for us. You know, this is again based on what we've been hearing from all of you all across the country, that yeah, we need to have some space for this healing and for this recognition. So the first thing we want to do is just acknowledge that Food Recovery Network, our headquarters, where I live, where Cassie lives, where Katie lives, where all of us live, is land, precious, precious land that has been inhabited by other peoples, you know, and they matter. They really matter. And so for here, where we are, we wanted to recognize and honor the Nakahanatang peoples, and I'm sorry that I'm probably mispronouncing that name, but these are folks that really lived in spirit with the land here in the DC region, the DC, Maryland, Virginia region. So thank you for that space to do that. The other thing that we wanted to do is honor all the Black lives that have been tragically taken during all of this unrest that has been happening for Black people have been on this country since 1619. And we wanted to honor the lives that have been taken. And the list here is not exhaustive, sadly. It's just a sampling of some of the people who have been taken too soon. All of these lives matter, and no one life is more important than the other. I just wanted to honor and recognize in particular Mr. David McAtee, who was a chef that supported Food Recovery Network, who did donate his surplus food to some of our chapters, and sadly, who was taken from us this summer. And so I just, with respect and with honor, ask all of us to share in a moment of silence to honor our land and all of these beautiful lives. Thank you.
Thank you all. I will now respectfully pull us out of our minute of silence. Thank you, Regina, for creating that space.
Thank you. And with respect for all of you here today, I'm again very thankful that we're here. With that understanding of equity, with trying food is a right, we have a lot of information for all of you. And again, really that invitation to hear from you what your thoughts are as we, with respect, move over to Katie to dig us in a bit further into where we are, what we've been up to. So thank you so much, Katie, for bringing us into this work.
Great, thank you all, and thank you for that moment. Before I dive into what we've been up to and our progress over the last 6 months, one of the reasons that we wanted to speak with you all today is because this is a presentation about what we've done the last 6 months, but it is also an opportunity, as Cassie said, to establish a feedback loop about where we should be going. And we wanted to start a dialogue with you all about what is your vision of a just and equitable food system. And if you have ideas on that now, you are welcome to put them in the chat. After I go through where we've gone so far, we'll come back to this question. But the reason we're asking this all today is because we want to put out the most relevant programming possible, and you all being so close to the work, we want to hear what you have to say about this. So as we continue to learn and evolve, we are actually working toward a shared vision of what a just and equitable food system looks like. So that's just a little precursor of the conversation that we want to have after we present what we've done so far. Perhaps what we've done so far will spark some ideas for you. This is also the beginning of a conversation with you all here. We're also going to be trying to have this conversation over social media in the next several months, again, so it can really inform our programming as we move forward. So with that, I'll move us on to the goals of the conversation today that have largely been covered. First and foremost, we want to share our learning and our data with the larger movement in hopes of what we're seeing in the field might actually help inform some other people on this call and how you might want to move forward. So that's the first reason for the call. The second is, as we said, and as we committed back in the summer, we want to establish a feedback loop with our stakeholders because we're only as relevant as the programming that we're able to put forward. And then lastly, we want to build and deepen our relationship with you. One of the things Regina and I have been talking about was how we build a call and response within the network. And so this is our first opportunity to try something like this out as a way for better understanding how we can engage with you in a way that works for you and is meaningful for the movement overall. So that's what we're going to try and do here today. So a little bit of an overview of what our year has looked like so far. This map that you see in front of you shows where our 140 chapters, official chapters, are this year. What you will see on the next slide is where the recoveries are happening this year. And what you will see is about 25% of our network is able to recover food. And that's for any variety of reasons, including their students weren't actually in person in the fall, universities or colleges put restrictions on who could recover. What's interesting about this data, when you look at the amount of pounds we've recovered so far, we are actually still on pace to recover the same amount as we have in prior years, if only 25% of our chapters were recovering. So for us, this really speaks to the strength of the network and our ability to contribute, to food to systems across the United States in a really meaningful way. A very obvious question is, if only 25% of our chapters are able to recover this year, what does this mean for the other 75% of our chapters? And as many of you, particularly the FRN students that are on the call today, know, we've actually expanded the ways that you can be a chapter this year. So one of the ways is, of course, recovering food. Another way is through engaging in peer-to-peer support. That's really where the FRN 10X comes from. So if our chapters can actually inform 10 other people about the amount of waste that's in the system, about the number of people experiencing hunger today, then that helps amplify our awareness and the need for this work. And then the last way you can be a chapter is actually engaging in our advocacy work. And as Regina mentioned at the beginning of this call, we know that we can recover all the surplus food and it still wouldn't feed everyone who's hungry because there are racist policies in place. And so how do we actually leverage our students in that work in terms of advocating for change to policies? So again, we can help in concert with other actors to feed everyone who's hungry in the United States. So the next slide, I want to just ground us. This is a very detailed slide in terms of what our strategic framework is, but I offer this because all of the metrics that we're about to present in the subsequent slides all roll up to this, in the sense of what is our unique contribution to the work? How do we feel that FRN can actually help achieve this result? And what you'll see here is, again, the result that Regina talked about before, and also the 3 strategies, which also align with how to be a chapter. And that is how we view FRN's unique contribution to the work and the indicators and metrics that we're holding ourselves accountable to help contribute to reducing. So what you'll see on the next slide is our targets. So when we say, where does FRN actually work across the food system? This year, we are delighted to have partnered with FarmLink on a national commercial farm scale, and also with the EPA on a smaller local scale to work on our gleaning efforts. And that has been an area of tremendous growth for FRN this year. And so these are a little bit about from farm. So where do we see ourselves working at that part of the food system? Through how we recover with chapters, through how we partner with our partner agencies to actually feed people. So this is what we were aiming towards. And if you go to this next slide, Cassie, this is our progress to date. So we're delighted to report that we originally had the goal by June to recover 1 million pounds of food from commercial farm fields across the United States. As of December, we are at 788,000 pounds, which is a really wonderful way that we can, again, a new way to put food back into the food system. And so this has been primarily through our partnership with FarmLink, and we're delighted that our students have been able to contribute in this way, particularly as they've been largely virtually volunteering to help identify commercial farms across the United States. But to Regina's point about our equity work, just because we're recovering a lot of food doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to the places of the most need. And so that is where our partnership with the EPA has come in, and we were actually piloting work, and now we're in Atlanta, which is one of our 10 states of priority, to actually recover food from smaller local farms and farmers markets, so we can be in closer proximity to recovering food where it is most needed. And this has been a model that we're really hoping to scale over the next several years, because again, particularly while we're in the middle of a pandemic, but even if we weren't, it's about how we get more food into the food system faster to feed more people faster. So these two ways have been a real expansion of how FRN has worked in the past, and has also just brought us a lot of understanding and learning about how we can partner and work differently in communities. So let me stop there. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and we'll ask questions about what I've presented so far, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we're interpreting that data and how it's going to inform how we move forward.
We have not had any questions come in just yet, Katie, but I'll give folks another minute or so to see if any come through the chat. As Katie said, you're more than welcome to raise your hand or put something in the Q&A or in the chat. I'm in all three places for you.
So I'll go on to the next slide, because this also might help prompt people's questions about, so how are we interpreting the data? How will what we've learned inform how best to move forward? So the first thing that I'll say is how we partner with chapters is something that we're really looking at closely, both in terms of what it takes for people to become a chapter and what it takes to retain chapters. And up to this point, FRN has actually been really blessed, where a lot of the growth has been organic, but it hasn't necessarily been in the areas where it's most needed. And so one of the things that we're doing over the next 6 months, particularly now as we've expanded the ways you can be a chapter, is actually trying to target recruitment of chapters in particular areas across the United States where we know our model is most needed. And how we decide that our model is most needed is we have used the EPA's map of where there is the most excess food in the United States. And we've overlaid that with the Feeding America data of where there are the most number of people experiencing hunger in the United States. And then we've overlaid that with where FRN has chapters. And so we've said, okay, how do we actually move our model, which is really about connecting latent capacity in the system? How do we actually move our model in closer proximity to the most need? So understanding that more is going to be a big focus of our next 6 months.
Thanks, Katie. And I wanted to share a little bit of what I've learned. Really more than in the last year, I've been reflecting a lot since it's almost March and thinking about a year in a pandemic. And I think FRN, something that I've learned is really building and practicing intentionality and also authenticity within our work. To Katie's point of being more intentional of disaggregated data to do so. And then also authenticity of having those conversations with our students, with our alumni. Something I always say is the question of what is a just and equitable food system. I'm sure many of the students on the call, you've asked that question before, or FRN alumni have asked that question before. And so really weaving in our work of the students, of building in that authenticity of our network. So it's something that I've just been thinking and reflecting a lot about over this last year. And Regina, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Thanks so much. I really just appreciate the reflections of both Katie and Cassie. It has been a whirlwind over the past, and I know that goes without saying, it's a truism. We're all affected by this global pandemic, and of the many things that I've learned is, from this amazing group of stakeholders, many of you represented today, and then just so many more of you, that as I mentioned earlier, going off of what Cassie said about this intentionality, and just knowing that there is a lot of unrest and just confusion, and the desire to connect and make something positive. And that's something that the students who started FRN, who have been part of FRN over the years, know that in our core, that we can do something today to enact positive change for our communities, and that has never wavered. And we've seen that across so many natural disasters, unfortunately, so many mass shootings. We've consistently been working within a system where people don't have enough food to eat. And so I've seen this unwavering commitment from our students, and I'm just so thankful that because we are hearing from everyone, we are able to build FRN 10X toward a vision that you all have, and that we are able to build in the structures to understand, are we going in the right direction, at the right pace, what's working, what isn't working. And that if something isn't working, we can either scrap it, we can either learn from it and fix it, or we can say, not this way, but maybe this other way. And that's all really important. And it's also the grace and space that a lot of nonprofits don't give themselves, that there are no mistakes, you cannot make any mistakes. Our commitment to being a public-facing, transparent, and publicly learning institution means that, yeah, sometimes things aren't going to go the way that we think they're going to go. But to Katie's point earlier, okay, that means something. When we get this data back, that means something to us. And so that's some of the things that I learned, over this last year. But truly, honestly, a lot of the unrest, with Black Lives Matter, and how much the network has asked that is blended into why we're doing this work, that food is a right, and who are the communities that are most affected, and why are they the communities that are consistently most affected. And our systems change work is really giving that space and that leadership to students who understand that they have a role in fixing that, so that, as we've said, many times, and I think this is definitely becoming one of our many mantras, is that, when people are in line to get food, they deserve food. But what we're working towards is that there is no line to begin with. And we can do that together. It's not going to happen today. We'll feed people today, but the structures that we need to put in place will take a little while for us to get there. And it's through conversations like this and your feedback on how we're doing the work that we will get there. So those are some of the things that I've been thinking about.
Thank you so much, Regina, for sharing your thoughts. While you were speaking, there was a couple of different questions and comments that came through the chat. So I wanted to stop quickly just for a couple of those questions. So first we have Samantha Irwin asked a question of Katie, specifically for you, the maps that you were talking about, if we have some maps available. So I can cue us.
Oh boy, do we.
A slide. Katie, do you prefer what state that we
Let's
do?
go to Texas, just because So this is an example of the Texas map, and I say we're going to go to Texas because we're actually going to be doing a concerted effort over the next, we're calling it a learning sprint internally, over the next 8 weeks to learn how can we actually recruit more universities in Texas. And you know, one of the things you'll notice from this map, and it might be a little bit small, so just trust me, is what we have around Houston is a really wonderful model because we actually have a chapter in Houston where the darker the purple, the more excess food, and the red dots represent where more than 20% of the population experiences hunger. So we have a chapter where there is a lot of excess food and where there are a lot of people experiencing hunger, so that our ability to get food into the food system very quickly around Houston is great, which is a very unique contribution that FRN can make. But if you'll notice that overall, a lot of our chapters tend to be in North Texas, and a lot of the need tends to be in South Texas. But we know that there are universities, again, in closer proximity to where there's people experiencing hunger. And we know we can have a footprint in Texas. So how do we actually expand this footprint? So we're going to be trying to learn really quickly over the next 8 weeks to understand what that looks like and what that takes, with the notion of actually trying to roll out that strategy across all 10 states come the fall. So you'll be receiving a number of requests on this call, but one of which is certainly if any of you have connections or friends that are currently going to school in Texas and you think that they would actually be interested in starting a chapter, please do connect them with our programs team. Because again, we really want to learn and understand what new chapters need, particularly in this new way that you can be a chapter, and then how we could probably apply that learning across all 10 states. So here's an example of a map.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie. And you answered another question that came through about how they can help, specifically with Texas. So thank you for that. We also had one more question come in through Tom, and he had shared that, so the COVID era chapter experience seems to shine a light on functional resiliency. The outcome may be the best way to see strength among students around the country. What else has chapter loss and gain showed us?
So I can take that, and then Regina. I mean, so what I would say to me, and one of my jobs as COO is to actually oversee the programs team. So we've been having a lot of conversations about this recently. You know, what the gain and loss has showed us is there is tremendous value in a leadership team transition and actually taking the time to identify who are the leaders within a chapter who can continue the work, because the need continues to be there and the infrastructure can be there as long as we have a cadre of people who are willing to step up and coordinate as other people graduate and move on. So I think particularly last spring, when so many colleges had to close so suddenly, there was less of an ability to set up a leadership team transition. And I think we saw that in our retention numbers, but that's something that we're making a cognizant effort to do this year and start early, because I think really building that bench is an important component that we have to integrate into our practice. Regina, what would you add?
That was so well put, Katie. And just to remind everyone, Katie's only been on the team for 10 months. And the insights, you know, that Katie has really been able to infuse into our work has just been phenomenal. The additional texture that I would add to what Katie said is, you know, because of COVID, you know, I will say just making sure that our students were okay emotionally was something that, I don't know, I just had a lot of, I just wanted to, I think a lot about that. You know, we worry about everyone. And we know that people have different support structures, and the FRN in that regard may or may not be the support structure that our students need, but really leaning into, you know, if you do need us, we are here. And I will say that the pandemic sort of asked us to say that a lot more to our students, that we really can't assume that everyone is okay and that they're where they want to be. And just, I know our work was already infused with the humanness of it all, but that's something that I've just been like thinking a lot about. I didn't think I could worry any more than I already did as an executive director, but I do. I think when the pandemic hit and we had to expand the different ways that students could be a chapter, we got lots of calls of people just being like, oh my gosh, we're not on our college campus, but we really want to be a chapter. That unwavering commitment and just having a broader method for people to become part of this movement, that will never go away now. So we saw, if not this, then this, if not this, then this. People are so diverse, and what connects them to FRN, it can be so different. And we know, I mean, that's the thing about from one chapter to the next with transition, but it's also, what is it that most interests the students, and just having different ways for students to say, like, I am committed to this movement, has been really wonderful. And I think a structure expansion that will continue. And I hope one that we can think of proactively as instead of reactively. And again, we hear that, we can do that when we hear from everybody, when we do build that call and response that we are so looking forward to having. We have it more, but we want it to get louder. So those are some of the things that I've reflected on, Tom. Thank you for that question.
Great, thank you. I will turn it back over to you, Katie, as we kind of circle back to the question around what a just and equitable food system looks like. And we did have a couple responses in the chat that I can read out if you'd like.
Great. So let me frame this up a little bit, and then I would love for you to read them out, Cassie, and then have some more people contribute if they feel comfortable. So again, our initial vision as we started this year was, in terms of how to build a just and equitable food system, was about how do we set up our infrastructure in the areas where we have a lot of supply and a lot of demand. So how do we, as Cassie was saying, disaggregate where we're actually directing our impact so we can feed more people faster. But that was really just one of the ways that we could have done it. And as we've seen from FRN over its 10 years, really the best solutions have come from the students. That's how we got our Food Recovery Verified program, as we expanded into working with businesses. So, we really do want to hear from all of you about what this looks like for you, because this is an opportunity to actually shape the way National would work and direct our resources accordingly. So with that, please do add to the chat if you have thoughts. And then Cassie, I'd love to hear some of the responses.
Definitely. Thanks, Katie. And yeah, Katie said add to the chat. And then we also have the option, if you'd like to voice your thoughts, if you just click the raise hand button through Zoom, I can go ahead and unmute you and you can share that there. So yeah, we had a couple of responses that I'll read out first from Annabelle. And Annabelle says, a just and equitable food system is one that provides enough nutritious, culturally appropriate food for everyone, promotes racial and environmental justice, provides all workers with a living wage and safe working conditions, and upholds the value of food sovereignty. I wanted to pause there too, if Regina or Katie, if you have any thoughts or reactions to that one. And then we have one more that I'd like to share from the chat.
I have a couple of early thoughts. And first, thank you all for sharing those ideas. As I was saying before, sometimes people get a little bit like, oh, I don't know if I want to put out my thoughts because then they're set in stone. They're not set in stone. They're absolutely not set in stone. This is iterative. Maybe what we were thinking 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we probably weren't even saying food is a right that long ago. I know that when I was growing up, that wasn't, an assumption that we could make. And FRN is here to say, food is a right. And we know other people are saying that as well. But the more all of us can raise our voice in that way, we can make that a reality. So thank you all for contributing. And like I said, as you think of other things, you want to amend what you said, things change. We want it all. one of the things that I'm very fascinated about within our movement is, this idea, this concept of food with dignity. And, when we think about the nonprofit space, when we think about, how did the nonprofit space come to be, we can get very nerdy about all this very quickly, but this idea of food with dignity. So I just really appreciate somebody saying, culturally appropriate food. Also, for those of you who have not yet read Matthew Desmond's Evicted, I think this is a really helpful in-depth look at what it is like to live consistently in poverty. Because we cannot assume people, if they have a home, they have a way to cook food. So when we think about healthy eating or, eating culturally appropriate foods, that maybe we are assuming people have a stove or a microwave or a hot plate, and that isn't always the case. And so these are the other compounding areas around equity that FRN is working on and supporting. Because we know we've had lots of conversations across our chapters around, what foods are we recovering? What foods do we have available? And when we have open, respectful conversations with our partner agencies, so I know all of you know this, but our partner agencies are the nonprofits on the front lines that are receiving our food. When our partner agencies are able to guide our chapters around, what kinds of food can we receive, I think that helps with that food sovereignty and providing food with dignity. Because FRN, we're not here to say, because you might be for structural reasons without a home or without consistent access to food, that you can't have cookies or that you can't have cake. That's not what we're here to say, but we are here to have an authentic relationship with our partner agencies to try to understand the kinds of food that we can provide. And so these are the different relationships that we see playing out. And I think, that does go into dignity, respect, that does go into what are we overproducing, that does go into, who do we think should have what kinds of food and why do we think that way? Not an answer to any of that, but just things that we think about. And I will say, different aspects of what I just said are louder at different times, even in the 5.5 years that I've been here at FRN. So we'd love to continue to have those conversations and dig in with respect to what this can mean for all of you.
Thank you, Regina, for sharing that. Samantha actually shared something similar to what you're saying around food as a right. Samantha had shared in the chat, addressing an equitable food system to me is where no one has to ask for food, where food is a right that isn't questioned and stigmas around aid are non-existent.
Tony Hillary of Harlem Grown will remind us, and Harlem Grown is a beautiful, amazing organization, and I say this all the time, the majority way that people get food is they buy it. It's not given to them. And that is when we have a just and equitable society, that people have the resources to meet all of their needs. And right now, we know that the unbelievable number, millions of people in this country, our neighbors, our family members, ourselves, that became food insecure, that were already toggling across it. Maybe we were food insecure a few years ago, kind of got out of it. Now we're back into that food insecurity. That's not a healthy system. And so thank you, Samantha, for bringing that up. I mean, that's what we're aiming for.
Great. And then I'll also share that Tom had shared in the chat that this helps him to think about what caused for our food system to become unjust and unequitable or inequitable, and the problem, how much of the problem was caused by economics and greed as a part of capital-based businesses. A lot of these just kind of, large questions.
And what I would say to that is, when you look at our results count framework, we have the one arm of it, which talks about our role in recovering the 26 million tons of wasted food from commercial and industrial settings. But then we have a whole other arm around economic security. And again, to Regina's point, and so many that have spoke on this call, and thank you, Tom, for that prompt. Again, like the reason people are experiencing hunger is largely because of economic insecurity. So what is FRN's role as an employer, but also what is our role in terms of mobilizing and educating our students around, for instance, paying the national living wage or universal basic income. That is another way where, again, like our advocacy work can be directly tied to some of these factors that we know have existed in the system for so long. So just to that point, one of the commitments FRN has made has been that we will only have living wage jobs at the national office. And we're actually, over the next year, going to be looking to create part-time living wage hourly jobs for some of our students to help support our chapters, because there is the immediacy that FRN creates around how we recover food and give it to people who need it. But then there's also the more complex work about how we actually change where capital is invested in the system, so we can actually start addressing some of those just ingrained racist ways of working that have really prohibited the system from changing. So that's one of the things FRN is looking to do in the next year in terms of how we actually change how we resource our students.
Thank you, Katie. So I'm going to go ahead and move us along to the next portion of our presentation. Definitely, if you have more thoughts in the chat around this question, and as Katie shared before, this is not the last time that we're asking it. Most definitely, you can keep an eye out on our social media. Our staff will be sharing some fun responses that we have to this question, and we definitely want to keep the dialogue open with you all as you kind of ponder on this question moving forward. So Katie, I will move it back over to you.
Okay, great. So as I had mentioned at the beginning, and this intention of a feedback loop is around, how do you want us to work with all of you? And when we talk about building a call and response, we want to have a better sense from all of you on the call about what that looks like to you. So for instance, it can look like what we're doing now, which is we're doing our work, and every 6 months or so we have a public meeting that says, here's what we're doing, and we're keeping you informed, and we're explaining why we do our work. But some of you on the call might want something else. So these are a couple different ways. Again, FRN, particularly for some of our students who are in school or they might be graduating soon, we have other ways to deepen your engagement with FRN, including our student and alumni advisory group. We have advisory groups of business, if again, some of you on the call, that might make more sense to you. So we wanted to see from you all, again, like, how do you want to work with FRN? What is this call and response? How could it possibly look? Again, so we can inform how we work with you all in the coming months. So these are just ideas. You might have other ideas. You can put them in the chat. I also believe we have a poll. So we're going to launch a poll again, just to try and get a sense of like, how would you like to work with FRN?
And as folks are filling out that poll, I also just want to remind everyone that, especially because we have so many awesome students, the engine of this movement, we know that you're representing your chapters, and this question goes out to everyone else in your chapter as well, and to your student body. How do they want to be involved? You can think about it in terms of you as an individual, because you're here on this call, taking your precious time to be with us. And then also think about, maybe sharing this call to others in your chapter. As a chapter, how do you want to work together? But then also every single member of your chapter, how do they want to be involved with FRN? There's so many different ways, as a unit and as an individual, that we'd love to be together with you.
Great, I can close out the poll now. We have some folks answer. Let me share the results. Wow, yeah, straight down the line. That's
fascinating.
That's pretty amazing. I love it.
And it's cool because it's specific to every individual, every organization that we work with. We've had a lot of these conversations in the past week, one-on-one with certain stakeholders in our movement, and it's really ranged. So it's kind of neat to see something similar with our larger network as well.
And you got it. We hear you. Noted.
Do it all of the ways.
Exactly.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to go ahead and start to close this out here today with a couple of, as Katie said earlier, a lot of different requests and actions. As Regina was just saying, invite some folks to our next roundtable or FRN event. We have many opportunities through webinars upcoming in the following months, where primarily for our students and our alumni, but definitely anyone is welcome to attend. We'll continue to have these roundtable talks throughout this week and in the coming months. Definitely respond on our social media as we engage further in this conversation of what a vision of a just and equitable food system looks like. And if you're interested in if you're able to donate one time or recurring to FRN to support our work, we really, truly appreciate that. So with that, Regina, I will go ahead and move it to you to close this out here today.
Great. I, again, just wanted to thank everyone so much for your time. Thank you to the students who are here in particular and our alums. We know how hard you work. And I will say we also have face masks at the national office that we can mail out to you. We have some in supply. If you find that you are doing recoveries and you need that, please be in touch with us. We want to make sure that everyone feels safe as they do this work. And if you don't feel safe, we understand that you might not be able to recover food right now. It's a global pandemic. And so we really want to, with gentleness, meet everyone where they're at. But just honestly wanted to thank everyone for their time. This is really big work that we're engaged in, that we have been engaged in, and we see where we need to go, and we will do that together. And I in particular wanted to thank Cassie and Katie for their commitment, showing up every day. It's not been easy on the national team. I will tell you, it's been hard for every single human being living on this earth right now, every single animal living on this earth right now. And so, but with gentleness and with an open mind and an open heart, we know that we can live the concept, that food is a right, that we can harness a just and equitable food system and thereby a just and equitable society, with more of us rising our voices up together. So I wanted to, again, thank you all. We look forward to hearing from you. We have a lot to provide to everyone, but this movement is comprised of everybody here. So again, big hugs virtually, and we can't wait to see you in person when we can, and more to come between now and our next roundtable this spring. So we look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas between now and then. So thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Like I said, we'll be sharing the recording, so you can definitely share that with any folks in your network. And you have our contact information here on the screen, and we look forward to getting in touch. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Wonderful questions.